Hey, what is going on, guys? This is Jason with Jadren Aquatics. Thanks for hanging out with me again. So if you guys have ever thought about starting your own fish room, this is the video you do not want to miss. Is I'm going to give you all the tips and tricks on how to start your own fish room from 2 tanks to 1,000. Stay tuned. Alright, so there is a lot of different things that we can talk about whenever you are trying to start a fish room. But let's talk about the most important thing, and one of the things that I failed at pretty miserably is planning. Is planning what in the world you're going to do with this big space or small space or whatever space it is that you have. You've got to plan. You've got to make some type of decision on what type of tanks that you want to have as far as size goes, how high you want them to go. There's just a lot of different things that goes into it. But let's start with the first thing that you need to do, and that is determine how your drainage is going to work. What type of drain do you have? So if you have a room that has some type of built-in floor drain or access to some type of other drain, then you've got to think to yourself, how am I going to tie into that? How am I going to take this, like here you see down here at the bottom, this is the drainage pipe that I have that runs the entire length. And this gives the ability for the tanks to drain off and then go off into some form of drain to get rid of the water in here. To me, this is the very most important step in setting up your fish room and designing this thing correctly. Because if you don't design it correctly, you then have, or possibly worse, this. If you see right here, this pipe is about 1 foot off the ground, so therefore it has to be stepped over. And surprisingly, in the 3 years that are here, no one has tripped over it. Now, I have smashed my shin into it a couple of times that hurt a lot because I just wasn't paying attention. But the problem is, when I first built this room, I had a wall right there, so this thing wasn't in the way, because I never thought to myself that I would keep going on and building out the rest of the garage. So that's also part of the thing that you want to think about, is whatever the room space that you have is, go ahead and come up with a design plan for the entire room. Even if you're only going to put up 3 or 4 tanks in it and it might hold 100, go ahead and come up with some type of rough plan for that entire room, so that when it does come time where you want to open up into other areas, it's really easy because you already know what your plan was and you don't have to make it up as you go along, because that's exactly what I did. And I know you guys are probably thinking, Jason, I'm going to set up a fish room, but I'm not going to have any type of automatic drain system, so what do I need that drain system there for? You want to do automatic water changes. Let me say that again. You want to do automatic water changes. It is going to change your life when you have that up. Believe me, when I started out, I had about 50-something tanks, and I did not have any type of automatic water change system on these things, and it made life very, very difficult. And what it does is it sets you up for failure. I mean, it absolutely does. Those times when you're sick or on vacation or you just can't get out here, or those times when you just don't want to come out here, because those times do come where you don't really want to come out in the fish room. Knowing that you have an automatic water change that's changing water out on these tanks every single day gives you that peace of mind of knowing that your fish are still going to be in healthy water. Whereas if you don't have that, they're going to be sitting in that same water, that nitrate is going to be building up, and you're going to end up having a lot of different problems on your hand. And even if for some reason if you don't decide that you're not going to drill your tanks, you still want to be able to have this drainage system here, because this allows you to have a place when you are doing, even if you're doing hand water changes, it's got a place where you can tie into immediately to get the water off. Maybe you want to set up a drainage system like right here on the front where you have some gutters that you can install so that you can remove water into these gutters, and then the gutters then run through gravity and down into the drainage system. So no matter what you end up doing, but you're going to do automatic water changes, but no matter what you end up doing, you still need to plan out that drainage system. Again, it's going to make your life so much easier, and everything else that you do, you can build around what your drainage system is. If you guys are enjoying this video and you would love to see more fish room tours, more fish store tours, and a bunch of cool DIY projects in my amazing fish room, be sure and hit that subscribe button right now. Okay, so my garage, or my fish room is in my garage, so I have no access to a drain whatsoever. So what I've had to use is a sump pump. And so all of my drain systems all drain into that. There's a pipe in the corner that gets all the aquariums that are on this side. There is a pipe that's right here that gets all the ones on this side. And then there's another one that's right here that gets all the tanks on the other side. So every single one of my tanks drains into this sump pump. And so this then, whenever it reaches a certain height, it automatically goes off and it shoots water out. So you've got to have a plan on how you're going to deal with that water. Now, I was lucky because when I had this house built, I actually had a doggy door built into the outside brick wall in the garage, and so I've got a big opening now that I can run this pipe out of. But that's something you need to really keep in mind whenever you decide to do, if you decide to do a sump pump, is having a good way to be able to filter that water out of your fish room. Okay, next thing is make a determination of what type of tanks that you want to have. What is your plan? Are you going to breed guppies? Maybe you only need 10-gallon tanks. That's kind of what I started out with, but I struggled with 10-gallon for guppies, and I think it's really better to go with 20-gallon longs or 20-gallon highs for guppies. Either one of those will work just fine. That's what I would suggest. My problem is I wanted to get as many tanks as I could into this size space that I had. And as you can see, as my room has evolved and I've torn things down and changed things, I have gone to lots and lots of 40-gallon breeders. I've gotten rid of a lot of 10-gallon tanks and instead replaced them with 40-gallon breeders instead, because I just like the look of them better. I like how you can set up kind of an entire ecosystem with lots of different types of fish or shrimp or whatever. And then pretty much the 10-gallon tanks that I have right now, that's where I keep all of my shrimp at. Now if you're doing shrimp, 10-gallon tanks are absolutely perfect. You cannot go wrong with those. Okay, next tip or trick. The space between your lid and here, I would suggest you always keep this at about 8 inches. Now, the reason you want to do that is because it's a whole lot easier to be able to get in here with a net and catch fish and get them out without having to bend your net all to death or just drive yourself crazy trying to get into your aquariums. Now there are a few of the ones that I did, like this one right here. This has got 4 20-gallon longs on it, and I'm limited with the space that I had, so I've actually made these. I think these are actually about 6 inches instead, and it works okay, but I feel like doing an 8-inch gap between your tanks is really the happy medium that you can find. Okay, the next suggestion is your spacing from your tanks from your wall. So let's look back here in the back of this one. And so right here I have plenty of room to get by. Now I'm not going to give you some measurements on this because this is going to be based upon your size. Now I'm about 170 pounds And so I can get into some smaller areas. If you're a bigger person, you're gonna need to leave more room that's in here so that you can get by. Now don't cut back on this, because you are gonna have to get behind these tanks, and you are gonna have to do work when you're back here, and you don't wanna be completely claustrophobic. These other tanks that you see back here that have some of these 20-gallon highs, these I got too close to the wall, so whenever I get going back through there, it is very difficult for me to turn my feet sideways, to get over that drainage line. I just caused myself all sorts of problems by doing that. Now granted, luckily I don't have to get back there very often, but I do still have to get back there. I get drain clogs, or I get air hoses, something has gone wrong with them. So I do have to get there. So please, please, please give yourself plenty of room between the wall and the back of your tanks. Now the next thing I want to talk about is just the amount of space that you have between your tanks. This space right here. Now, for the longest time, it aggravated me that I had such a big area right here. This is probably about a 7-foot gap between the tanks, because that's how I originally set this thing up, because I didn't do any planning. But I'm so glad that I did leave this big open space here, because it gives me the ability to really enjoy my tanks better. It allows me to go around, and it allows me to be able to film better and not have to worry about you know, crashing into these tanks that are behind me. I know you see some fish rooms and the tanks are just absolutely jammed in as tight as they possibly can. So I would totally suggest that you have more space to be able to enjoy your aquariums, because in the end you're going to be so much more happier than having difficulty getting into your tanks. Now let me explain to you kind of the difficulty, because that is something that I did run into in this area right here. So in this area right here, you can see these aquariums are only about less than 2 foot apart. So it's very difficult to squat down and to try to work on these tanks, because you're crashing into the tank behind you. It's very difficult to film because I can't see the viewfinder on my camera because it's so close. So this was definitely a mistake, putting these things just way too close together. So again, all these things fall under planning. Plan out how you're going to get your tanks separated and give yourself plenty of room between them. I would suggest probably 3 to 4 feet between your tanks, absolute minimum. There you go, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you learned a little bit from this. If you guys that have fish rooms out there, you got some tips and tricks that you want to share, be sure and share those down below. You guys got any questions, be sure and leave those down below, and I'll get back to you just as soon as I can. So thanks again, guys, and God bless.